Thanks for tuning in. If you're watching on YouTube, be sure to hit the subscribe button to stay up to date on all our latest video content. If you're watching on LocalGov TV, be sure to visit their website to see all of the content made for you by your local governments. Alamance County is pleased to present the Alamance County Commissioners Meeting.
We have Vice Chair Carter, we have Commissioner Bill Ashley, we have Commissioner Boswell, and we have Commissioner Sutton. So if you would please join me in an invocation. If you care to pray with me, you are welcome to. If you don't care to, then please do not. For my prayer for the invocation today, I wanted to share a prayer that was given by President Lincoln in March 1861. So if you aren't a person of prayer, if you want to reflect on the historical significance of this prayer, then you're welcome to do that. Almighty God, who has given us this good land for our heritage, we humbly beseech Thee that we may always prove ourselves a people mindful of Thy favor and glad to do Thy will. Bless our land with honorable ministry, sound learning, and pure manners. Save us from violence, discord, and confusion, from pride and arrogance, and from every evil way. Defend our liberties and fashion into one united people the multitude brought hither out of many kindreds and tongues. Endow with Thy spirit of wisdom those whom in Thy name we entrust the authority of government, that there may be justice and peace at home, and that through obedience to Thy law we may show forth Thy praise among the nations of the earth. In time of prosperity, fill our hearts with thankfulness, and in the day of trouble, suffer not our trust in Thee to fail. All of which we ask through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen. Amen.
If you would join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, the first item on our agenda is public speakers for our items which are agenda related. Today we do not have the use of our overflow room, which we call an overflow room. Other people call it a courtroom. And the court system is using that today for court business. And so we are limited in our space. And so we have the opportunity for people to call in. They had to sign up to either call in, or the clerk will call them, or they could have submitted email comments, written comments to be read. So Madam Clerk, do you have anybody to call?
Yes, first we have Melvin King of Mebane.
Great. You call Mr. King.
Mr. King?
Yes.
You're connected to the County Commissioners meeting.
Hi, Mr. King.
Okay.
Hi, Mr. King. This is Amy Gailey. Can you hear me?
Good morning.
Good morning. You may begin your public comment when you're ready.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Is everybody there?
Yes, sir. We can all hear you.
All right. Am I ready to start?
Please do.
Crank it up.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
All right. The first thing, can everybody hear me?
Yes, sir. We sure can.
Is everybody there?
Everybody is here.
Okay. Well, the first thing I'd like to say is how dare people come to Alamance County and protest our sheriff and try to tell us that our sheriff needs to resign. These protesters don't understand that the only thing that's protecting them is the police here in the county. And if you look around, I think Alamance County is very fortunate to have Terry Johnson as our sheriff. There's no burned out buildings, no broken windows in stores, no cars burned in the streets. And I just don't think people from other locations need to come here and tell us who our sheriff needs to be. I think we're very fortunate to have Terry Johnson. As far as the monument is concerned, that monument needs to stay exactly where it is now. These people that want to tear down all of our monuments and take our history out of the school books are wanting to overthrow our government. And we could wind up like Cuba, Venezuela, China, and Russia. People died by the thousands in Russia because the government was trying to overthrow and do away with their history. And they're trying to do the same thing in this country. The young Confederate soldier on that monument is descriptive of my great-grandfather, who was joined the 6th Regiment of Alamance County at the age of 18. He was wounded and captured and confined at Point Lookout in Maryland, and he was released in a prisoner exchange and was with General Lee when they surrendered at Appomattox Courthouse. He came back home and started running the family farm. Slaves were freed and a lot of them had no place to live, nowhere to go. He took some slaves in his farm and gave them a place to live. They ate from the same food that the King family did. Their eggs came from the same hen house. The milk came from the same cows. And they had a place to live. Now, Tim, you'll understand this. This is one of those people that turned out to be sharecroppers and tenant farmers. When my great-grandfather died, he had one daughter, and she inherited the farm. She lived on Harris Street in Burlington. Her husband was Sid Horn. He run the shoe shop.
Mr. King?
The shoe store.
Mr. King?
Well, ain't many couldn't farm, so
Mr.
she
King?
had to have somebody to do
Mr.
it.
King,
Yes.
Mr. King, your 3 minutes for your public comment are over, so if you want to have a sentence to wind things up, that would be appropriate.
So what?
Can you tell him?
Repeat it, Tori. I don't think he can hear.
your 3 minutes.
I'm having a hard time understanding you.
Your 3 minutes to speak is up. Do you want to go ahead and wrap it up?
Sure. Well, thank you for letting me take the opportunity to do this.
Great. Thank you.
And I thank you for the job y'all are doing.
Thank you, Mr. King. We appreciate that. Thank you for calling. Is there another person to call?
Yes. Next is Azure Walker Roberson.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear that.
Azure Walker Roberson.
This is Asher.
Ms. Roberson, you're connected to the county commissioners meeting.
Good morning, ma-
Spectrum News.
good morning, ma'am. This is Amy Gailey, the chair. You may begin your public comment when you're ready.
Okay, thank you and good morning. My name is Azure Walker Roberson, and I'm a resident of Graham, North Carolina. I'm speaking in support of the results of the people's referendum on August 15th. Nearly 2,000 residents voted, and of that number, over 2/3 of the votes support, 1, removing the Confederate monument from outside the courthouse, and 2, repealing the 287G warrant surface officer program in the Alamance County Sheriff's Office. Those voting represented all corners of the county, all ages, and all walks of life. We are your constituents, and duty to your office requires that you listen to us. It is no accident that the Confederate monument sits on the same site where Wyatt Outlaw was lynched by the KKK, and that the historical context of Alamance County's willing participation in the Confederate War has been unjustly conflated. The vote to remain in the Union was 1,114 versus 254 to secede. According to the Alamance County's own website, the fact that the statute stands before a symbol of justice exacerbates all injustices historically expressed towards people and indigenous people, Black and indigenous people of color, and continues to represent racism and encourage hatred and oppression of our friends and families in Alamance County. I ask you, commissioners, respectfully, to call for a vote on removing the monument. Our community considers the monument and 287G program together because they both degrade the safety and cohesion of our community. Sheriff Johnson enacted the 287G program without input from the community or from the county commissioners. This is not a transparent process. It puts our community at risk by creating distrust between the community and law enforcement. As our elected representatives, we ask you to work with Sheriff Johnson to repeal the 287G program. People want to have a say in the decisions that shape the present and future of Alamance County. As an elected official and community leader, I urge you to listen to your constituents and act on these matters at the next county commissioners meeting. Thank you for letting me speak this morning.
And thank you for calling in. We are glad that people take advantage of that opportunity when it's available. Hope you have a good day.
Thank you.
Okay, do we have any others?
That is it for that, Madam Chair.
Okay, do we have any written comments?
Not on agenda items, only the public hearing.
Okay, thank you. Then the public speaker time is over. Do we have any commissioner responses today?
I'd like to respond to Melvin at the price of being ridiculed, ostracized, and called names, as well as other. Melvin, if you can hear me, I want you to call me. I believe my great-grandfather and your great-grandfather were together, because my great-grandfather went in Company I or Regiment 8, Company I, whatever, and I would like to talk to you about it. But thank you for calling.
Okay, anybody else?
Just one comment about putting the monument on a ballot. We've checked, and the monument can't be put on a ballot, and I've asked Clyde Albright to make a comment to that effect.
That is correct. That is not something that can be the subject of a referendum under North Carolina law.
And also, I saw that another county had floated the idea of having a local bill, giving them the ability to have a referendum on it, and the legislature's adjourned, and there's not going to be any bills. And at the time that was raised a few months ago, they had adjourned with the opportunity to come back to consider specific types of bills COVID relief and appointments to different commissions, and because of the way the General Assembly does business, it was not possible to get a local bill through on that issue this year.
I spoke with Representative Rydell, and he did some research on it and said that the earliest that approval for putting this item on the ballot could be implemented would be in 2021 during that session. And because that type of a ballot issue requires all precincts to be open, the earliest it could be put up for a vote on the ballot would be 2022.
Right, probably the primary 2022. Okay, any other responses? If not, let's move forward. The next item is approval of the agenda.
I move that we approve the agenda.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the agenda. If there's no discussion, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? The next item is the approval of the consent agenda.
Motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. If there's no discussion, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, next item up is a public hearing on the solar energy system ordinance. We would be seeking a motion to open the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Commissioner Lashley has made a motion to open the public hearing, and Commissioner Carter has made a second. If there's no discussion, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? We had to have sign-ups in advance for the public hearing, and I believe we have 3 people or organizations or entities which have requested to be called to the public hearing.
Yes, Madam Chair, we had one written, written submission and 3 requested callbacks. So
Okay.
which you wanna-
Let's do the calls first, please.
Okay. The first person is Mike Fox with Tuggle Duggins.
We're together.
Hello?
Hello?
Hey, Mr. Fox, this is Chair Gailey. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. We were connected with the Alamance County Board of Commissioners meeting. We are on the public hearing for the solar energy system ordinance, and I understand you have a public comment to make.
Great. Thank you very much.
You may begin at any time. You have 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you. Well, first of all, I want to say thank you to your staff and your planning board. They've done a great job in working on this ordinance. And this ordinance will be a great improvement for both the solar industry that's interested in growing in Alamance County, and also for your citizens in terms of understanding what solar is and protecting the viewshed and property values, etc. We think that the pulling out of the solar ordinance from the HIDO ordinance is the right thing to do, and they've done a great job with it. We had originally submitted 2 different comments to be considered at the planning board. They took care of one, and so there's one left that we'd like to ask your board to consider changing, and that is the requirement in section 6 on article section 6, yes, of Article 3.
I think that's Article.
No, I'm sorry, Section 6 of Article 4, where it requires the renewal of the solar operating permit every 3 years. And it specifically states that the permit shall expire. And I think the objective and the goal from the planning board was to ensure that these solar operations get inspected every 3 years, which we're fully supportive of. Of course, the county has the ability to inspect at any time.
And if there are any deficiencies or anything, they can give notice, and the solar operations have to fix them, or they risk losing their permit. But we feel that the inspection can be accomplished without the permit actually expiring. And the reason that this causes a problem for the solar industry is that when they do these projects, they're almost all financed in some way by a financial institution, a bank, or some other entity that is in the financing business. And when they go to do their due diligence on whether they're going to loan tens of millions of dollars to a company to build a solar farm it's going to be in operation for 25 or 30 years, it causes a real problem when they look and they see that the permit's going to expire in 3 years and then have to be renewed. And you don't ever want to make your banker nervous. So we're asking to try to have another method of getting those inspections. We've submitted some proposed language to Ms. Cottle to be considered that would essentially, instead of the permit expiring and then having to be renewed, it would require a site inspection once every 3 years. Whatever fee there was, the solar companies would be glad to pay. This is not an issue over the fee at all. And then obviously if there's any deficiencies, those would need to be fixed or the permit would be at risk. If there are no deficiencies, then you just move on and mark the calendar for the next 3-year inspection. We feel like that accomplishes the goals that the county and the planning board are trying to achieve in a way that does not make it harder for the solar industry to come in and finance their projects and build good projects in Alamance County that add to your tax base. So that's our request, and there are a couple other folks from the industry who are I think going to speak and give a little more detail, but we would appreciate your consideration of this change to the ordinance. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Fox, for that comment. We appreciate it. Thank you for calling in.
Thank you all very much for this consideration.
All right, next we have Sam Judd with Strata Solar.
How do you spell his last name?
Strata.
Thank you.
Good morning, Sam.
Good morning. This is Amy. This is Chair Amy Gailey from the Alamance County Board of Commissioners. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, yes.
Great. Well, we were connected with the meeting. I understand that you wanted to be heard regarding the solar energy system ordinance in our public hearing.
Right, correct.
Okay, you may start at any time.
Okay. Is Mike Fox on?
Mr. Fox has already submitted his public comment.
I got you. Okay. Well, I think Mike might have summed things up pretty well. Just by way of introduction, my name is Sam Judd. I'm with Strata Solar. We're based out of Durham, North Carolina, and we're one of the biggest solar developers in the state. It's not the largest. We've got about 400 employees in Durham, and we've built upwards of 100 solar farms in North Carolina, most of the 30 to 50 acre variety, which nowadays is considered pretty small as they're getting bigger and bigger. But at any rate, we've done quite a few. And I wanted to comment on the draft solar ordinance. So section 6, where it says SES permit renewal required.
we think this section where it says SES permits issued under this ordinance are valid for a period of 3 years and shall automatically expire unless renewed. We think this section is going to be a problem during project financing, where we're getting looking for financing partners. It's just the way it reads. They're going to think, well, the developer, whoever is owning and operating the project, even if they do everything right, the permit could be revoked, during this time. We understand the concern, and, we'd be happy to have the project inspected every 3 years. And if the buffer isn't up to code or up to snuff, or if the project isn't being maintained, then of course it would be subject to revocation, per the terms of the ordinance. But just the language in here is going to be really hard to swallow for financing parties. I spoke with one of our attorneys here who handles financing transactions, and his description was this could be a big issue. So. Yeah, we have concerns with that section, really, that language there. And we would propose, I guess, that, every 3 years, the project would be subject to an inspection. And if the project isn't in compliance with the code, the permit could be subject to revocation per the terms of the ordinance.
Okay, is that the end of your comment?
Is that the end
That's
of
it,
this?
yes. Yes.
All right, well, great. Well, thank you very much for participating in that.
Absolutely.
Have a good day.
Thank you. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Okay.
Next is Carson Hartrader with Carolina Solar Energy.
Hello, this is Carson.
Good morning, Carson. This is Chair Amy Gailey from the Alamance County Board of Commissioners. Can you hear me okay?
Hi, Chair Daly. Yes, good morning. I can. Thank you.
Good, thank you. Well, you're connected with the County Commissioner meeting this morning, and we are having the public hearing on the Solar Energy System Ordinance. And I understand that you had a public comment that you wanted to make.
Great, yes. I have one question. I don't know if you can answer questions, but is the vote on the ordinance today, or is that going to be at a later meeting?
The vote on the ordinance, if somebody makes a motion, we can vote on it today.
Okay, thank you. And so we, Strata Solar and my company, Carolina Solar Energy, have been working with Mike Fox. So Mike's comments at the top of the public comments represented my comments as well. And Mike mentioned that the specific language that we were hoping for changes in this section 6 regarding the 3-year expiration, he had sent that to Tanya Cattle, so I don't know if that's available today, but that was the particular language that if there is a vote today, we hope is available to be voted on, so we can resend that if needed, but we have just written it out, and the new language, to Mike's point and Sam's point, just changes it from a 3-year expiration automatically to a 3-year inspection with expiration if the inspection results in issues that are not cured. So it's kind of just a tweak to make it a little bit less, the language less worrisome for our financing. So that's the same comment that my company has. I've been to speak there in person a few times on the solar ordinance. Some of the landowners that our company is involved with in Alamance County have been there to speak as your constituents. As Mike and Sam said, we're very grateful to Alamance County for all the thought that you and your staff have put into the solar ordinance. And with that one change,
we think we'll be able to move forward with our future project in Alamance County. And we're, again, very, very grateful for all the time and consideration and thought you all and the planning staff and the planning board have put in. So that's the end of my comment. Thank you.
All right, great. Thank you, and thank you for calling in and for your comment. Have a good day. Do we have any others?
Yes, Madam Chair, we have one online submission by Colin Cannell of Mebane, and his comments are following. Based on the description of the proposed solar farm ordinance provided in the Alamance News of Thursday, August 27th, as a resident of Alamance County, I support the proposed rule change. The new ordinance recognizes that solar energy is unique among industrial development in that it produces neither noise, nor emissions, nor traffic, nor any other nuisance. The ordinance recognizes the potential for decommissioned solar panels to present a toxic waste disposal problem and requires applicants to address this. The cost effectiveness of solar energy is increasing at incredible speed. The cost of panels and batteries has dropped off faster than anyone expected over the last 5 years. A thriving solar presence would bring high-tech maintenance and installation jobs to the area. Although the committee may consider solar a niche application, and although Alamance residents may find the installations ugly at the moment, in the long run, the energy and environmental needs of Alamance County will be best served by encouraging the solar industry wherever development rules permit. And that is all the comments I have.
Great. Thank you. And I don't believe there's anybody present in the room who is here to make a public comment on the solar ordinance, but just to be sure, I'll ask, is there anybody present who wants to be heard in the public hearing? And seeing that nobody has come forward, that would be the end of the people seeking to be heard. So do we have any motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Lashley and a second by Mr. Boswell to close the public hearing. If there's no objection, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay, Tanya Cattle is our planning director. If you want to come up and tell us about the ordinance, and then we'll address the things that we heard in the comments.
Good morning. Good morning. How you doing?
I'm good. So y'all have seen the draft of the ordinance. We did a small presentation at the last meeting about the ordinance. This ordinance will just pull language out of the HIDO that specifically speaks to solar energy. We will come behind this when this is resolved and touch up the HIDO to pull it out so it stands alone in this one ordinance. There's a little language at the end that does some revocation from HIDO, so immediately upon approval it does exempt it from the HIDO, but we'll do the touch up too. The ordinance went through subcommittee and planning from the planning board to come up with the language. Myself and Ben from legal sat in on it. Started with a base from the state kind of generic ordinance, and we added in specific Alamance County language, pulled some language from the HIDO that made sense to keep. So some of the things that you haven't seen in other ordinance really probably came from that template that the state had put together for local jurisdictions to start from. You've heard a few comments from solar industry. We did expect that. We have worked with them throughout the project, invited them in. We've had YouTube meetings and allowed response to that during the process to make sure that we're not too far off on what expectations were. You've heard the one comment about the renewals. Do have language that was sent over the holiday to me from them in respect to the renewal process. I will say this has been brought up probably 2 or 3 times to planning board and subcommittee about wanting to pull that renewal out. As a board, they decided that they weren't comfortable with that. They're more comfortable with this renewal process. It sits exactly the same as the HIDO renewal process, keeps some consistency across the board of all of our ordinances, and they feel like there's an obligation to the industry to come back to us to get their renewal straight and make sure that they're in compliance with us. So that isn't arbitrary, that was discussed more than once to be sure that board wanted to keep this in there.
I can tell you from a finance perspective, that would create some heartburn for a lender. Having done that, I'm sure Tim can agree that when you're making a loan that typically is going to be, a commercial loan might have a 5-year maturity with a refinance option with a 180-year amortization or something like 180-month amortization for a project of this size. Having a 3-year expiration on your permit could create some heartburn from a lender's perspective, because you don't want to own as a lender, the bank doesn't want to own anybody's business. I can see that causing some real problems for getting
I can see that would be a problem. Yeah, that would definitely be a problem.
I think the word expiration in that whole thing is where the problem is.
That's exactly right. I
When
believe
something expires, it does not give you an assurance that that's going to continue on. It's kind of like you jump through the hoops to start with, but now it's time to jump through them again. Is there not a way we can revise that a little bit to say at 3 years they will be re-inspected, and provided they've done what they're supposed to,
You could say
they
shall.
continue?
Yeah, I like
It's
that
a
idea.
continuance instead of an expiration.
There's specific language at the beginning of that section that he had called out, and I believe it's Article 4, Section 6. And it says, our version of it is, SES permits issued under the ordinance are valid for a period of, let's see here,
Where are you
3
now?
years. Article 4, I believe, Section
Yeah.
6.
That's where I am, yeah.
For 3 years and shall automatically expire unless renewed. That's the language probably that they're most called up on. You really don't see the expired word again.
Well, automatically expire. unless
And
renewed.
automatically expire to me says they're gonna shut it down. I mean, I've got a building license, and at the end of the year, they say it expires.
So this is the same language that we
Right.
have in the HIDO. Just that's where that came from. So it's of course up to this board how your pleasure on what that wording should be. But that I believe is where the concern is.
What's the language that was submitted by
For
Mr.
what
Fox?
Mr. Fox submitted, he says SES permits issued under this ordinance, and we're striking out are valid for a period of, and he says shall be subject to a site inspection, the SES site inspection once every 3 years. That's the end of that.
To continue. That's what
And
that
And then
could
he
say
went
something.
into renewal fees, site visit requirement, and adjusted some language to copy. And
Do you have a copy of that too?
I have just one copy, yeah. I did not realize he hadn't sent that to you.
No, yeah.
Because it came in over the weekend. I
How
thought
about,
you want Jordan to make copies?
Yeah, Clyde needs one of those too to look at.
I mean, you could use language, something to the effect of shall be renewed subject to a satisfactory inspection
Yeah, I think
at the
that's,
end of 3 years versus shall automatically expire.
yeah. Yeah, that's the same thing in real estate. If you can't get something refinanced after 5 years, you're in problem. If you're selling a home, it's a problem. In the same way with this situation here.
Well, that kind of brings back to an issue in the HIDO. I didn't recall that language like that, but in the HIDO, if it's limiting, if the licenses are expiring at the end of 3 years, we may be putting somebody that's doing a development in the same issue if they're trying to get financing and their license is automatically set to expire.
Well, they didn't, we had the industry, the solar industry has specifically come
Right.
up to us and addressed this. We didn't
Right.
hear the same concerns from other industries with the HIDO. Mr. Sutton, did you have anything you wanted to say?
Well, I'm not going to lie to you, I don't know that much about it. What are the pros and the cons of doing what, where the ordinance stands now versus going to what the ordinance proposes now? Let me say that. See if I can get an answer on that. And vaguely, I had heard or thought I saw or whatever that there were some issues about solar farms and that they weren't as popular for how they used to be or whatever. I don't know. I'm just saying that, you know, and if you go here and look at some of these articles, I mean, the Chicago Tribune, the New York Times, the Washington Times, they're writing several articles that there are some issues with solar farms and their proclivity or whatever. I mean, what? And again, I don't, help me, educate me a little bit. I mean, is there a downturn on solar farms as far as how they're being viewed by scientists and or environmentalists? For instance, you've been a farmer, you know, I saw a big article here that it was affecting farmland and so forth, or some people were thinking that it was. I'm not trying to knock down solar farms, but I need more information myself to see if we've explored it properly and or what's the recommendation, and Brian, your recommendations, county manager, what we should do as well. Can we wrap all that up into some type of discussion?
Let me start with the first part, the pros and cons of the language being proposed. Like I said, the subcommittee and the planning board were not in favor of making this change. I think if a change is looked at, some of the language in what's being proposed is to put the burden on the county to go after the companies for the renewal. We had done it the opposite direction of the companies are responsible for renewing their own permit, not the county going after them kind of thing or sending everything out. Pros, I guess, are that the industry has a little bit more ease to getting financing, getting projects within Alamance County. The con for us is, as the language is written, it puts more burden on staff to take care of the actual renewal process.
And who was opposed to it at our level?
Well, no, we're not really opposed to it, but the language of bringing it in to this county will be responsible for initiating those inspections upon 3 years, as opposed to the applicant initiating that in 3 years.
Okay, forgive me, I might have missed or induced into what you said. Did you say somebody was against the ordinance being changed at our level, planning or?
The planning board and the subcommittee specifically did not change this language when Mr. Fox came to them originally during their meetings, because they didn't feel like this was a good change for the county. They felt like they needed more teeth than just the enforcement part, that this gave more teeth to the county to make sure a group is in compliance and doing what they need to with the county.
If I may, I think Mr. Sutton, correct me if I'm wrong, I think he's asking, what do you think? I think he's asking, what does the staff say about it?
What do you say? What do you say, Tony?
I could go, personally, I could go either way, and that's what I told the board when they were having this discussion. I don't want the burden on the county because we have enough things that we keep up with, right? It would, to me, be more on the permit holder to be responsible to come in and renew their permits. I can do a site inspection anytime. Anytime I have a complaint, I go out. So I have those enforcement abilities already in the ordinance. This being every 3 years, that just guarantees me that whether I have a problem or not, I'm going to lot that property every 3 years. That's either with a site inspection or renewal, kind of calling it something that equals the same to me. I'm still going out and I'm still going to issue an approval if I go out and everything's good.
I'm a little confused. You still got to go out every 3 years, no matter.
They're still proposing
if
a site inspection, yes.
Yes, you still got to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So
It's just the revocation of the permit. If I go through an enforcement type action, there's a lot of time built into that to give them the opportunity to fix something if I find something wrong.
right.
This allows me to revoke much more quickly if we have a problem.
How many solar farms do we have in the county?
You know, I believe we have about a dozen approved. We don't have that many in the ground.
I'm just kind of putting a burden of how much more burden is that to the county staff?
Once every 3 years, not too bad.
Okay. That's, yeah.
Depends on how many more we get. We've gotten a lot of interest since the HIDO
Right, I
started to be
understand.
rewritten, so I don't know exactly what more we'll have. I think I've probably got 3 kind of in the background, waiting to see what's going to happen with this ordinance to submit an application.
So basically, we only have, 2 or 3 active right now?
Right now, talking to them.
And they would have to just fall under this guideline. Every 3 years, they got to make sure that y'all can do your site, or you got to make sure you do it, whatever. You just put a little check mark on solar farms every 3 years. And
Same thing that we're doing with heavy industrial.
I mean, you gotta do it, it's part of y'all's job, I mean.
And in the HIDO,
Yeah.
it does put the burden on the industry to come to us to renew their permit,
Right.
as opposed to proposing the other way.
Was planning unanimous on not changing?
Yes.
Okay, how many people is there?
So I know subcommittee, there's 3 people that's on subcommittee. No one on subcommittee was interested in making that change. I probably had maybe 2 that were semi-interested in making this change on the planning board. We have a board of 13.
Okay. What was,
How many were present for the vote? You have a board of 13, but.
We have a board of 13. I believe we had 11 that night, so we had a pretty good turnout for that one.
what's the main concern collectively, consensus-wise of the 11 that they were opposed? What was their?
The big concern was that they want to have enough teeth to take care of a problem, and they don't know that just the enforcement section gives them enough teeth to do what they want to make sure we can take care of. Which is kind of the same thing that they did when we rewrote the HIDO. It was the concern that if something goes wrong, we need the ability to take care of it as quickly as possible and pull that permit if we have to. Faster than our enforcement section allows us.
From what the industry is saying, this is a poison pill, and we won't have any solar farms to inspect. It's not a matter of whether or not, how many you're gonna have to inspect. It's not gonna be any, because they won't be able to get their financing. They won't be able to come
If you can't get
here.
a finance, it's never gonna happen.
That's right.
I'll make the motion if it's a,
Well, she hasn't answered all my
Okay.
questions yet, Bill. The national concern that appears to be cropping up on this issue, that I cited. Are we
You're
even
talking about
looking at that?
environmental concerns more?
Well, everything where there could be a concern, yes.
So I know there's some places that don't have decommissioning plans, so once these finish off their lifespan of the 25 to 30 years, they're just there. And local governments don't have any teeth to get that material out of there, and nobody maintains it, it just sits there and kind of falls apart. So we do have that in our ordinance. That's something like way back when all this started, people didn't realize they needed to put that piece in, and then it came after the fact, and so they lost some ability to do that in the early projects. We don't have that problem because we've written that in our ordinance. There are some that are afraid that solar farms create cancer. I don't think that that's actually been proven for sure, that there's some fear of that more or less. And just way solar farms go in, there's a little land disturbance when it's put in, but then the grass grows up underneath the panels, so there's very little ground issues or water runoff kind of things any different than the natural land would have rolled anyway. And there are some people that seem to think that it would be, and we haven't seen that.
What about the
Just
disposal of panels and batteries and so forth?
So right now, they have a recycling program for those. There's parts of them can be recycled, all of it cannot. So they have a way of disposing of that is environmental friendly from what I understand. I haven't had to do a whole lot of that, haven't been in a lot of decommissioning areas. Everything's kind of new around here, so it's getting put in more than taken down.
Okay, I'm through. If I vote with planning, I'd be voting against a motion to approve this. Is that correct? I want to make sure.
No, the ordinance as a whole, we of course think is something very efficient for the county and should be done. It's just a little tweaking of the language for the renewal that is
Just
up for
amending one
controversy.
line in this thing is basically what we're talking of, maybe amending before we vote on the ordinance.
Could be.
Is that
That's
right?
our
I want to
only piece
vote
of all
with
of it.
planning on this. So what vote would
Planning's
that
gonna
be?
recommend approval of the ordinance. If we have to have a small tweak in the renewal, I think we can live with that, as
Okay.
opposed to
Well.
losing the whole ordinance.
I would like to hear Clyde just respond to the proposed, one sentence right there is really what this boils down to.
Well, you could follow the method that the Department of Transportation uses when you want to renew your license. You don't have to renew it, but when you do, you have to say, I've got insurance, and my car's been inspected, it's not polluting, it's not unsafe. You may just want to make that registration renewal rather than expiration.
I think that's a good idea.
The expiration word is what really, like Steve said, a banker's gonna see that and say, well, you're only allowed to operate for 3 years, so now what are you gonna do if they change? What if you got a new board of commissioners that decide, oh, let's amend this ordinance in 3 years? You come up for a renewal.
Right.
Right.
Where do you go, Mr. Banker?
It's important
That's
to
right.
remember that you're talking about two different permits, the operational permit to build, and then, I mean, construction permit to build, and the operational permit needs to be renewed. Just like your license and registration
Exactly.
and your driver's license needs to be renewed. So in order to do that, they go out, they say, okay, we want to renew it. And we're signing this affidavit that says everything is done that needs to be done.
And this isn't carte blanche to say you can run for 50 years and never anybody from the county come and
That's right.
interject to what's going on. So,
Right.
Well, this appears to be one and the same, though. It doesn't differentiate between a construction and operations, right?
So the operations permit, you get the construction permit, and once you've actually built it out, then we give that operations permit, gives them a
Right.
go, gives them building inspections department will turn their power on. So that's kind of the trigger for all of this renewal. Renewal wouldn't start until after you can actually operate.
Did you have a state template to work with on the permit or on the solar energy process or
We did, that's part of what the aviation decommissioning plan. and all that
aviation,
we did.
right?
What do other counties do? Is this, what would be more typical of the industry and other counties' practices? Would it be to have the permit expire, or would it be to have an inspection once every 3 years and then
renewal.
renewal?
A lot of places don't renew. If they have an issue, they go through their enforcement process. This is not really part of most ordinances to do a
So
renewal.
this is an extra layer
Yeah.
that we've added. So,
And of course, anybody can do an inspection at any time, so that language isn't necessary to add on unless you just want to, and that's what our board had wanted to do.
right. Bill, you stick with your motion there too?
Well, I'd like to add what Clyde said, at least I don't want to make it hard to stay in business, to get a loan, to stay in business. So I'd like to make a motion that we allow them to get it renewed without, how would you want to say that?
I just require that it be renewed every 3 years.
And just strike the
Not
and automatically
expiration.
expire.
Just take
Clause.
expiration out, that seems to be their word they don't like.
Yeah.
Clyde, I have a suggestion here, where he said shall be subject to a site inspection, say shall be renewed subject to a satisfactory site inspection.
Yes,
That's a good addition.
that'll work.
Yeah, if you just put shall be renewed subject to.
Subject to a satisfactory
to-
site inspection.
Yeah, and that would fix that right
Make my
there.
motion to that.
Can I amend you've got a second on your motion?
Not that?
Okay, can I second that motion, subject to a couple of other typos that I'd like to point out to get it fixed? Section 5, you've got, if you follow the flow under Article 4, let's see, that was right, Article 4. Article 4. Right, under Article 4, you've got Section 1, 2, 3, 4. Then under Section 4, you've got subsection 1, then some subsections under that, then subsection 2, fees. Subsection 3, approval of SES permit application. Subsection 4 is appeal of a denied application. Then you've got item, or what appears to be subsection 5, but that looks like that is supposed to be, that's either supposed to be
Shouldn't be under.
Section 5,
It should be section 5.
Section, yeah.
and then under that, you've got subsection A, and then you've got a 2, which probably should either be 1, or A should be 1, and then 2, and then
I
3.
think A should be 1.
You see that, Clyde?
Yeah, A should be 1.
Okay.
Is that your amendment
That's
to
my
straighten that out?
amendment, and
A friend of mine,
second.
does it affect the cows? That's all I want to know. Affect the cows.
Not to my knowledge.
All right.
He's
It
going,
affects farmland preservation.
Yeah, well, that was one of the points I was bringing up, but, okay.
so is that your amended motion?
That's my amended
Mr. Carter?
motion, yes, thank
Okay,
you.
so we got a motion and a second now.
Could I ask another question then? Does the district, the farm district, have rules that kind of help preserve away from that, if that's what they want to do?
Not yet.
All right,
Not yet.
somebody needs to get behind them. I know you will.
It's a subject of discussion.
All right.
All right, so we have a motion by Mr. Lashley and a second by Mr. Carter to approve the solar energy system ordinance as amended. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Is there any more discussion? If not, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? All right, thank you. And I also want to thank the Planning Board Subcommittee and the Planning Board. I know that the subcommittee especially worked really, really hard on this for a long time. And they're just a group of citizen, not just, they are a group of citizen volunteers who really, you know, sacrifice their personal time. They could have been doing other stuff. And this stuff is pretty technical and not interesting to, many people find it less than interesting. So we really appreciate citizens who are willing to give up their time and energy and be engaged in all of that.
I also understand you have a landscaper on there, which is great, that can add comments to help you kind of understand trees and plant and placement and all that good stuff. So,
Yeah, I think his expertise, his Vaughn Willoughby, I'll call his name, and his expertise was very well received and valuable to that process. And who were the other people on that subcommittee?
Ashley Harris was on there, and Gene Brooks, he's a vice chair.
Great. And then the people who serve on the planning board as well. They, I know
Right,
that
they did a final review and approval.
They worked really hard on this ordinance for a long time.
thank you, Tanya.
Thank you.
did a great job.
And thank you
I
to
thought the
them.
rest of the ordinance,
Yeah, I think it's really
very good
well.
ordinance. I
well
think
written.
we're in good shape.
All right, so the next item on our agenda is a request to set a public hearing for a proposed mobile home park, but it's a tiny house park. Do you want to tell us a
This
little bit
has
about it?
something that this board has never seen since the ordinance was written back in about 15. Things changed over and planning took over what was mobile home parks and campground kind of things. And it merged into one ordinance and it became ours. So no one has come before any of the boards asking for any kind of modification to the ordinance requirements. So this will be a first. This hearing is a quasi-judicial hearing. Y'all got your information on what those are and everything. So it's a little more teeth to it, a little more processy than a regular public hearing. But this has come before the planning board, and you'll see at the end of July is when the planning board heard their case and gave a recommendation of approval. It seems like it's taken a little while to get through, but the owners have asked how the meeting's laid out, that they could be at a night meeting. So that's how we kind of had to shuffle a little to get all that in line for them. That's how we're ending up to request the public hearing to be at the end of September, at September 21st meeting.
So the request is for September 21st?
Yes, ma'am.
At 7 p.m.?
I'll make a motion that we have that.
Second.
Mr. Boswell has made a motion that we approve a public hearing for that proposed mobile home park at September 21st at 7 p.m. And Commissioner Carter has seconded it. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay. And then we have another public hearing for a community development block grant.
So what we're asking for is a blanket public hearing. It's 2 separate dates that you have to have those for community development block grant program. The program actually puts out different types of grants throughout the years, so we want it just for community development block grant. However, if you see in the write-up that we are looking at a specific coronavirus grant that they're putting out that we're looking to make application for. But we have to meet these 2 public hearing requirements to get to put the application in. So we're looking for the first public hearing to be September 21st, if the board wishes.
I'll make a motion that we do the public hearing September 21st.
Second.
Bill?
Okay, Mr. Boswell has made a motion and Mr. Lashley has seconded it to set a public hearing for that purpose on that date. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Thank you. All right. Next item on our agenda is the Alamance County Voluntary Agricultural District presentation. We have Brad Moore, who's our Soil and Water Conservation Administrator, and Mr. Frank Bell.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I like your coat.
Brad, you got time?
Thank you. You might want to give him to Brian, too.
Well, good morning.
Morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for this time that you give me to speak with you this morning. One of the handouts, one with the yellow on it, you can just look at it at your leisure. It's basically kind of a one-page snapshot of the history of the VAD and the Farmland Preservation Program since the beginning. As many of you know, that if you travel or live here very long at all, that North Carolina is a very diverse agricultural state. We produce everything from catfish to Christmas trees. North Carolina is very important in the food production system, not only here, but in the nation as well. But there is one statistic that I'm not very proud of that we rank very high in. According to the American Farmland Trust, North Carolina ranks number 2 in the nation for farmland loss between 2001 and 2016. In 2001, the Voluntary Agriculture District was formed out of the concerns and challenges that landowners were facing at that time with new development. Primarily when everybody's backyard in a new subdivision backs up to a cow pasture or a farm field, there was some challenges, misconceptions, things of that nature. Basically, the VAD program allows farmers to be highlighted on a map that's located in the register of deeds, and it informs potential new neighbors that they're moving into an agriculture community. In 2005, House Bill 607 established the North Carolina Agriculture Development and Farmland Preservation Trust Fund. This program assists with the purchase of development rights. In 2007, Alamance County submitted their first application to the program and was awarded our first grant. With a combination of state and county funds, we were able to permanently preserve 120.16 acres in the lower part of the county. Since that time, Alamance County has received 6 more grants. Some of our more recent successes that you've heard me talk about is the Lewis and Chandler farms that were closed on earlier this year. We closed on them basically in February and June, and we started on them basically in 2017, September 2017. So you can see the length that these some of these contracts have to get closed. You've heard me talk about some of these farms before. Lewis is a small dairy farm in the southern part of the county that preserved 92.66 acres. And Chandler is a small grain farm in the northern part of the county that preserved a little over 75 acres. With a combination of state and county funds, the program has permanently preserved 580.8 acres. To date, $371,073 of county funds have been used to leverage $1,302,981 in state funds and landowner donations. At this time, we have some comments from Mr. Bell.
Thank you, Brad. I can't talk with this thing
Hard to
on.
do, isn't it, Frank?
I hope, am I in compliance?
You're fine.
First of all, I've been in this county 60 years as of June the 1st. I call this home. It's a wonderful place to live. It's a wonderful place to educate your kids, and I'm proud to call this home. The first thing that I want to say today is this. Every time I've been before you guys, I beg for money to be put into the budget for farmland preservation. You heard the statistics. We got to do something about those figures. If we're gonna survive in the county that I love and you love so well, we have got to create some means to preserve this land that we can produce food and fiber. The first thing that I want to share with you is give you a word of thanks. In 2010, I had a meeting with the chair of the county commissioners. At that time was Tom Manning and Bill Lashley. We discussed some of the opportunities that we had in this county to promote revenue. You listened, but most importantly, you acted on the recommendations that we had, and you brought it back and y'all decided and passed to hire 2 employees into the tax department, which for years we had not audited present use value. I'm going to give you a brief. We have added, since 2010, almost $48 million to the tax base in this county because we took action. It's cost a little, but today we have taken out of that program 585 farms that did not comply, which created a revenue to this county of about $1,800,000. That's reoccurring income every year. Thank you for listening. After reviewing these figures and being involved in this operation for the last 11 years, I've come to some awakening realizations. We cannot, on the money that we're being given and the budget constraints each year, and y'all know better than I know, everybody wants money. They want more money than they had last year. So we cannot afford to continue to just alone have the support of the county in budgetary money and the matching of the state if we're going to farmland preservation, if we're going to preserve the farms in this county. As y'all know, this pandemic has caused a lot of things. It's caused us to look at a lot of reruns. And it's given us an opportunity to use our minds. I think you all know I don't have to push this point that my love is for rural people. That is the salt of the earth. Those are the people that put the food on our tables. I got to thinking about this. In 2001, I believe it was, that we formed this VAD program. I happened to be on that committee for 6 years, the original. This year before last, Brad came to me and wanted to know if I would consider serving again. And I don't have the word no in my vocabulary. I'm gonna try to do what I can to help my fellow man. So I went home, I started thinking, how can we put together a volunteer program that will help our young farmers and ranchers? And I've come up with a brainstorm, and I want y'all to listen to today and give us your opinion and your endorsement. I shared this with Mr. Haygood. He thought it had merit. We took it from there to the VAD board and introduced it to them, and they thought it had merit. We in turn formed a committee to continue to talk about it, and I introduced it to that committee. That committee consisted of Mr. Haygood, Clyde Albright, Amy Gailey, Ms. Kaylin Kingsbury, and y'all know her. We got into a relationship with them in 2015, the conservatory, Brian Moore, and myself. We sat here and discussed it, and I want to share with you the thought that we had. First of all, there is a need in the community, in the county, among older people who are landowners that don't have any way to disperse their assets. They don't know how to get rid of their farm. They don't have any relatives. So we agreed that we need to, as a county, come up with a simple way for them to contribute to this farmland preservation. If an older couple wants to donate the farm, Buster Sykes is an example, y'all know familiar with all of that. If they want to donate it to the county, then we want to learn how to agree to take care of that. If they want to will it to the county, we'll accept it. We'll even carry it through probate, and there's two sides of that. We can help a young farmer by doing this if we want to give him half of the revenue that we received, and he financed the other half, then that gives him inroads to be able to afford it. That's one phase. Here's the other phase. Let's say that we inherit a 100-acre farm. If we inherit a 100-acre farm, we've got the opportunity to accept it into the county, it becomes a county property. We can lease it, and this is a very viable option. There are young couples out there that think they want to farm, but they have never been exposed. We as a county could lease that land to them for an interim period of time so that they could test some waters, so to speak. At the end of that time, they have the option to buy that property or forget about it, drop a lease. We can do it over and over and over again. The other thing, we need to make it simple enough for people. Tim has got a lot. He decided he's a farmer, but he's inherited a lot down yonder on ABC Street. And he is a friend of agriculture, and he wants to donate that lot to the county. So what we do, we advertise it and we sell it. And it goes in the farmland preservation funds to pay for rights down the road. You see, these possibilities exist. There's a lot of expertise right here in this room today. We got the know-how, we got the expertise, and we got the clout to get to the people that can help us accomplish what we want to accomplish. We got to have the will. There's people out there struggling, trying to find out, what am I going to do with my property and who do I want to leave it to? And there's people out there just begging for the opportunity to have the opportunity to grasp it and do something with it. But they don't know how to help. We need to put the expertise and the know-how behind it to put a program in place that's affordable. The other thing, this is not set in stone. We're in the committee talking about it. How many of you know anything about a QCD?
Quick claim deed?
Y'all ain't old enough yet to remember that. The law is that when you become 70 years old, if you're in an investment program, you've got to take some of that investment out, a percentage of it yearly.
RMD.
Huh?
RMD, required
Right.
minimum distribution.
Right. Now, a qualified credit distribution, that's what it amounts to. There are people out there that don't have any farming ability and don't care, but they love the rural area. They love the green space. We've already took that analysis. We know where we stand in this county as it relates to the popularity among green space. There are people, I'm one of them, that would be willing, and that's on a yearly basis, at the end of December every year, you've got to make a determination of how much and where you're going to put it. You can roll it over, but you're going to pay tax on it. Some of these people would determine that I want to give $10,000 to farmland preservation, or I want to give 15 or whatever the amount is. So they can designate that. Now, what we need to do and what we will do as a committee is that we need to let them know, and I'm getting to that, what the tax benefit for them doing that would be to their bottom line.
Right.
It can make a big difference. That's another part of the program. I believe that this if we put together, it's not in stone, it's a work in progress at this point. This committee, and I think all of you know that we've got the ability, these committee, Clyde's a lawyer, Kaylee is a legal counsel as well. She's working with us already. We've got the ability to search this thing out and research it and make it work. But we've got to keep it simple. And we've got to set it. We've got to set it. Well, I'm going to tell you straight up, I'm not a fan of our promoting things in the county, what we've done to promote what we want to accomplish. I want, and I'm on, we ain't even talked about this as a committee, but it's in my mind. I want us, and I'll pay for it, to get a professional people that put together a brochure that depicts exactly what the program entails, how it will benefit those people who are donors, and that's what we put together, and we sell it to the general public. I feel like this can be a solution for the state of North Carolina and every 100 counties it is to adopt some program of this nature. But we can be the pilot ship. I like this. This is the reason I like this county, because we listen and we act. And usually the results is positive. What I want from you people this morning, and Brad wants from the volunteer act, I'll answer any questions you got, and if I can, I want an endorsement from you people. See, if you either like the program and give us the authority to go ahead and proceed with a final draft of what we propose to do, and then when we get the final draft done, we'll come back to you for any suggestions you got or any changes you want made, and we'll adopt it and we'll go full bore.
I think that's a great idea.
I do too.
I think it's a great idea. It'll help the county and it'll help the individuals that want to live in that green space.
Frank, one thing you just said then reminds me back years ago when the voluntary ag started putting these programs together, the state started looking here to figure out how to do things. And I think what you've come up with here is an excellent idea.
Yeah, people who's got money were willing to give that money away, and hopefully they'll stop giving to these liberal colleges.
Well, you can,
Are there any
definitely be a
nearby?
tax benefit.
Yeah, be a tax benefit. That's
Yeah.
right.
Get an RMD out of a
Well, that's
retirement fund.
that's what's been on my mind, and everybody's listened to it, thought it was an idea that we could make work.
So Frank, would this committee be kind of coordinated with Brad and the
Yeah.
voluntary ag kind of leader on the
Yes.
point of it to put
Yes.
it together?
Would it have to be a 501c3? Is that what we're looking at?
I think that there would be a detail to be worked out. What kind
We
of
got
structure.
some homework to do,
Mhm.
but it ain't nothing we can't get accomplished.
Right.
That's right. That's right.
Well, I think our staff is nodding their head like this pretty.
Yeah, I appreciate him listening to an old plowboy.
Well,
Motion on that?
I
or-
don't think we need a motion. I think we have a
Consensus.
consensus that the general idea has the blessing of the board. I did have a couple of remarks that I wanted to make. You know, we've been in the process of updating our land development plan, and there's been a lot of public input received as part of that process, and it has been overwhelming and consistent in support of farmland preservation. That has been a goal that has been voiced by the people who've, the residents who've looked at the draft land development plan, or as it's come forward. People have consistently emphasized that farmland preservation is a big general goal of the community. Also, it's one of our, smart growth is one of our pillars for our
Agriculture.
vision, or strategic plan.
That's right.
And then I was recalling that in fiscal year 2019-2020, we added position to the planning department. And the reason we added that position, and there was I'm sure Mr. Bell remembers very well, that the farmland preservation folks wanted an increase in the amount of money that was going to farmland preservation.
$250.
But then we discussed it and decided to take some of that money and allocate it toward that position instead, so that so we could deal with some of our land use challenges and coordinate with the land development plan and other things. And so I would suggest, one of the things that I've noticed working in local government is that things get done and proceed much more smoothly when you have a staff person who is dedicated to be the meeting scheduler, the minute taker, the person who has responsibility for the follow through with different things. And so, you know, with due respect to the county manager and to the planning director, I would humbly suggest that person whose position was added to the planning department, that that person be considered as a staff person who's working with Mr. Bell and Brad Moore and other people to facilitate that and to make it better. And if it turns out, in looking at the work plan and what that person is already doing, if shifting things around makes more sense, then that's a suggestion.
Certainly.
Are we looking at a recommendation to bring back to the commission then, that we would then vote on, because we're not talking about a vote today?
I think so.
Yes, that's correct. I think today we wanted to hear if the board was supportive of what we've been talking about with Mr. Bell, and it obviously is, then we'll work to put together, Clyde's help, Tanya, Brad, Mr. Bell, something to bring back to you at a subsequent meeting. We'll try to do this soon because we know those opportunities are out there. But bring something back for you to approve that has some infrastructure that Clyde can help us put together that allows some of these things Mr. Bell's talking about to actually start happening quickly.
If you get it before the end of the year, people are making these contributions and taking care of that.
We wanted this done as quick as possible.
Right.
Some of you guys ain't gonna be here after November or to January.
You're gonna miss us, aren't you, Frank?
And I want to thank you for having the ear for agriculture. All of you have been very supportive. We don't know that's going to happen after November. So thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank.
Yep.
I want to reflect on a comment that Brad made, catfish to Christmas trees. You know that it's actually recycled, because our wildlife club, Alamance Wildlife Club, collects Christmas trees off the side of the road and puts them in our ponds to create habitats for young fish as they're hatching to grow in the pond. So it's a circle.
Yeah.
All right.
Before you sit down, can you go back several slides? Some people were holding up signs. Yeah, right there. The one on those two on the right with the streaks, what does that say? I can't read that.
That's a voluntary ag district.
Oh, okay.
Yes, sir. So that's one of the larger signs. So when people get in the voluntary ag district, we give them a free sign that's about the size of a license plate, and it looks like that. A lot of people display them like on their mailbox, things of that nature. Yeah. Some people choose to purchase a larger sign, and some people put it at the driveways or entrance to the farms. And I think one of the goals this year for the Soil and Water Office is to come up with possibly a video or a brochure that explains to the general public what this sign is. When people drive around the county, they see what it is, just to help get some better understanding. But it just lets them know that they're in an agriculture district and they may have sounds and smells associated with farms.
Yeah, they're all over Guilford County. Everywhere I go in Guilford County, I'll see a sign similar to that.
In Guilford County, I believe they give out the large signs for free.
Yeah.
And we looked at some different grants and so forth, but that's what that is. Those are the closing. There on the right is Randy Lewis, the closing in February, and the one on the left is Mr. Henry Chandler. closing we did, I believe, in June.
And they're in the permanent.
It's permanent.
Yes.
It'll be preserved forever.
Well, I got to tell you this, and I'm going to tell you right now, I need to probably grace your farm before I leave this state, but because I know I haven't been out there, and I do want to say, though, I admire the heck out of you. And over in Guilford County, Steve's Troxler, you know where Steve's Troxler's farm is up there? He's got that tobacco. I went out there. Well, I go out there every year and stand at the end. I did it this year. Stood at the end of his rows. Go back to his house when he first planted, when he put out, and then I went back for 2.5 months and watched that tobacco grow. And it's I love spring when they start planting all this stuff. Went over to Kernersville, over by Glenn High School, where they have this huge Shields farm that grows triple sweet corn, and watched that grow and sold at the farmers market. And then there's a dairy off of in Guilford County.
Sockville Farm.
I believe that's right.
Right
That
there,
is the
that's
name of
over,
it.
yeah.
And went up to the fence and took pictures of cows. Well, what gets me is I'll have a student in my car and I'll point to a big tobacco crop and I'll say, "Do you know what that is?" And this girl driving one day, she said, "Lettuce." And she knew it was tobacco when she got out of that car.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Frank.
We've been going an hour and a half, so let's have a recess.
Thank you very much for that, Madam Chair.
That's the biggest problem, always.
Good.
Kind of fortunate in the pandemic year that we're in.
Yeah, that farm.
They ain't gonna vote on it.
Soccer's not one.
Okay.
Where that
Homeland.
Is Reedy,
You
Reedy
know where
Ford
Osceola
Farm?
Yeah, that's up 29.
Reedy Ford?
Isn't it? No, 3M. I'm thinking of 3M.
Stockport. Reconvene after the recess. The next item on the agenda is the presentation about the monument on Court Square from the county attorney.
Good morning.
Mr. Albright, if you wouldn't mind coming up over here to do your presentation, I think we would appreciate it. I'm not sure the camera can get you over there very well.
Okay.
He's got a face for radio though,
I'll have you do it.
Thank you.
At least you got some.
Yeah. Howard Coble used to tell me I'd never trust anybody with all your hair, Clyde. He used to tell me that. But anyway, I've been asked to give you a summary of the laws regarding the monument. We've done a study on the ownership of the monument and determined that May 16, 1914, it was presented to the county and was accepted by the county, and it sits on county property. In North Carolina, we get too close to it. North Carolina has we're not a home rule state, and county government is obliged to follow state law. We don't have any law other than that we get from the state. And in 2015, the state of North Carolina passed General Statute 100-2.1, Protection of Monuments, Memorials, and Works of Art. Section B of that statute is entitled Limitations on Removal. And an object of remembrance located on public property may not be permanently removed and may only be relocated, whether temporarily or permanently, under the circumstances set forth in the law. And those circumstances are if you temporarily remove it to preserve it, or if you're going to build a new courthouse and you want to remove it, you have to put it back within 90 days of the completion of the project. If you want to move it to a location other than where it sits, it must be permanently relocated to a site of similar prominence, honor, visibility, availability, and access that are within the boundaries of the county. So, specifically it says you can't relocate it to a museum, a cemetery, or mausoleum unless it was originally placed there. And that is the summary of the law as it applies to the monument. Bob, answer any questions if you have any.
Did that law state limitations to the county, or when I was reading over the law, I thought it might include the fact that it's in Graham City. Would it not have to remain in the city?
Well, it just says the jurisdiction of where it is located. So that would be Alamance County. You have to be a place of prominence, and I think that would require it to remain somewhere close to where it is now, in front of a courthouse. Now, Section A of this law applies to the state of North Carolina, and it says, if it's owned by the state, then before you move it, you have to get the authority and approval of the North Carolina Historical Commission. But they make a distinction between state-owned memorials and county-owned memorials. So really, that puts the limits on you as to what you can do under the existing law.
So, the only way we can move it is the General Assembly said you can move it, basically.
If the General Assembly should change the law, then the county could do, if it allows you to, then you would be bound by that state law.
So we have to have their stamp of approval to ever, as a board, remove it, right?
Yes, we're not a home rule state.
It's
Although
Dillon law, isn't it? Well, I remember
Yes.
that's something from home
Yes.
builders when we
You're
sued
correct.
the state, because a lot of local jurisdictions were doing impact fees at one
Charlotte
time.
tried to do that with the bathroom bill.
Mhm.
And they don't have any jurisdiction. And of course, the cities, the same thing. They've got
Right.
no authority other than what the state licenses them to have. We're a political subdivision of the state, subject to the authority of the General Assembly.
So even if we passed it, or got a bill passed to allow for a vote could not be taken until 2022, and even if there was a vote to relocate it, it would have to be under the restrictions of that code.
Unless they amend this law in
Right.
addition to passing that other law.
In legislation.
Right. And that would be for the General Assembly to consider and the governor to sign.
It's kind of clear cut, isn't it?
It's really limited as to what you can do. I think the goal is protect, the title says protection of monuments, memorials, and works of art.
So, I understand that Chatham County moved theirs. There was a monument in Winston-Salem that got moved. But can you distinguish between those situations and Alamance County's situation?
I don't know who owned the monument in Chatham or in Winston-Salem. That seems to be a key. The statute talks about the property being on public property, and I think that is the distinction there, because I believe in Winston-Salem it was continually owned by the daughters of the Confederate.
They didn't switch ownership and give it to the city or the county.
And I believe Chatham County may have a license agreement or some type of written agreement. We could not find that in our records. And we went all the way back to 1849 when this county was formed and looked at everything we had access to, including the articles from the Gleaner, which is online. You can read about the dedication and the county commissioner, the chairman of the county commissioner at the time, I've got his name here. The language used was, let me see.
Got a hold?
Presentation of the monument by the president of the daughters, and then acceptance of the monument by George T. Williamson, chairman of the board of the county commissioners.
So when you look back through the minutes, was there, of the Board of County Commissioners from that time period, were there any entries regarding payment for the monument?
There was a state law authorizing the payment of, I think, $1,000 from the county and $1,000 from the city of Graham, authorized up to that amount to pay for the base.
A state law? You said
Yes,
state law.
state law.
Oh, okay.
So
And
that
that
they
was
authorized that to
Yes.
actually build the
In
base to set the monument on.
In 1913. That courthouse that's standing there now was put up in 22. The old courthouse was smaller, and it had a set of scales because this was a marketplace. This is where people came to sell their vegetables and food and trade. And they had a set of scales right there where the monument stands now. And so, in 1914, when they dedicated and placed the monument there, they moved the scales and set the monument there. And then it was determined the courthouse was too small. And so in 1921, the General Assembly authorized the county to build the new courthouse and to raise taxes to pay for it. And at that time, the monument was moved because, and it's kind of funny, the documents I read, the Johnson brothers tore the whole courthouse down. And Mr. Nix offered his store as a temporary courthouse while the new one was being built. And then after the new one was built, they put the monument back. But that's a hard read if you go through the minute book because it's all in cursive.
Oh, gosh.
Very.
And they didn't have Tory back then to get it good.
Well, they didn't have typewriters, and handwriting's beautiful, but you just have to get used to reading it.
This is probably look like F's.
So, the question has been raised to me whether Statute 100-2.1, the Protection of Monuments Law, it says that it applies to things owned by the state. Can you talk about that a little bit more?
Well, it's in Section A, and it's done by exception. It refers to except as otherwise provided in subsection B, a monument, memorial, or work of art owned by the state may not be removed, relocated, or altered in any way without the approval of the North Carolina Historical Commission, because it's state-owned.
But that's specifically state-owned. Ours isn't state-owned.
That's our exclusion.
That's
the
it.
county, right?
And then it refers you to Section B, which talks about any remembrance located on public property may not be permanently removed, relocated, except under the circumstances that I just read to you.
Thank you for that clarification.
You're welcome.
So it seems like part of the crux of the issue is people will say that, well, there's a pretty vocal group that says that it represents something that is offensive, especially to people of color, and it's in a location that people of color have to experience it or view it on their way to the courthouse. And so it should be moved. So part of the problem with it is its prominence. And the law requires us to move it to some place of equal prominence. So that problem is inextractable, really, because any place we would move it to that would be of equal prominence would also be offensive to people of color and others.
Well, there are people in our country that burn our flag. So the American flag may cause adverse reactions emotionally by some. But it's our flag, and it's in a place of prominence in front of the courthouse, in front of all of our courthouses.
Yeah.
So that argument, and I understand what they're saying.
Interstate interchange.
But there are different views on that. This law was written to protect our history and our memorials. So there's more to it. There's more to it than the people that want it torn down would have you believe.
Well,
That's how we learn is our history. If we forget history, we will not know where we came from and not know where we're going.
Well, the movement afoot today is to tear down history, it seems like, because, I mean, even a monument to Ulysses S. Grant was torn down, which made no sense at all to me. I mean, I may be missing something there, but Christopher Columbus.
Well, Frederick
They tried
Douglass.
to get to Abraham Lincoln. I mean, the guy that emancipated, you know.
The
Frederick
mayor of
Douglass's
Washington,
monument was
D.C. has
destroyed.
proposed tearing down the Washington Monument and bulldozing the Jefferson Memorial, posted that on a page, and then took it down within a day or two and replaced the link with something else. You tear down history, you're destined to repeat your history if you don't tear it down and learn from it. I don't think anybody in here wants to repeat where we were in the 17 and 1800s. We're a different culture now than we were then. And if we're a different culture now than we were then, we all need to come forward.
Okay. Does anybody have any
My heart's clear.
other questions or comments?
Thank you, Clyde.
All right.
Thank you, Clyde.
Move
Thank you.
forward. We have a historic courthouse facility use policy.
May I reach for my other
Of course.
pile of paper here? You may recall we were sued by the NAACP. I think it was in May, over the access to the courthouse and protest, to conduct the protest. They also sued the city of Graham. So we have been jointly working with the lawyers for the NAACP and attempting to come up with a policy that will protect protesters and property and our deputies who face the fire every day, and also allow people to express their First Amendment rights. And I reviewed with you a copy of that policy. I think I sent it to you last week. I want to emphasize that we are still working on specific terms in that policy with the attorneys for the NAACP. But the concerns that we have as a board, as a sheriff and as a county, is when you issue a permit, you got to be mindful of the danger to health and safety that may be out there. And you have to have an appropriate site suggestion. If we have 1,000 people coming to protest, it may not be a good place to be right in front of the sheriff's office or right in front of this building. If they want to protest in the traffic circle and block the street off, and we account for public safety and we account for security, then those are the type of things that our facility use policy covers. We've also added a provision in there for the person that applies for the permit. We look at their past conduct, whether it was good or bad, and those things are considered when issuing a permit. We also would like to know who that person is, and that they are indeed serious about complying with the permit requirements. And so there's a small fee to process the permit. There is also a small group exception to the permit. If you're going to have 4 or 5 people, you really don't need that much security or much area to do this. If it's during the work week and we've got trials going on in our working courthouse, we need to be mindful of that. That's also in the permit under government activity. And there's also a provision for permit approval timelines. One issue that they have brought up is the crosswalk. And we've asked them to stay out of the crosswalk, because that is a crosswalk. That's not the street. And people go into the courthouse and use that crosswalk to get to their car or other buildings. And we've got some temporary access restrictions on there too that will protect our citizens. And I think it's good policy. We've worked on it for weeks with these folks since our hearing of July 30th. And I think we've come up with a very good policy and a very good permitting process. The Sheriff's Department, Captain Sykes, and Chief Parker have been working with us on this. And I think we've got something that's a very good policy. But I want to emphasize that on the policy we have an effective date and we have a last revision date. And that's put in there to emphasize that this subject to being revised.
And I guess circumstance will determine if it needs to be revised.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Question.
Yes, sir.
Is there a requirement for personal or organizational liability for any damages that might occur?
Well, that's part of our permitting process, knowing who's who. And if there's past misconduct from a group that wants to permit a certain area, if there's been property damage, if there's been a lot of arrests for assault, battery, and that type of thing, those things will be taken into consideration before you issue a permit for a group that has a history of. And that's one of the things I insisted we put in there. Our goal is to protect our citizens, the property of our friends here in Graham. That's their goal too. We want people to be able to express themselves in a peaceful way, but we don't want it to get out of control. And as we've seen throughout our country in the last 6 to 7 months, it has gotten out of control. And this is the type of thing that's a balancing act between the constitutional right to free speech and our desires to protect people and property.
Has this been through the court to
We have a
review?
case, we have an ongoing case.
Okay.
Judge Eagles is a judge assigned to it. And this temporary restraining order doesn't end the lawsuit. The lawsuit is still ongoing. We're hoping to reach a settlement, and that's what we're working towards with this. And we think this may be a good settlement, a good basis for discussing settlement.
Well, the only problem I see in what you said about looking at history on an individual applying for a permit is there's always a first time. At some point, there has to be that first time.
Right.
And if you don't require personal and organizational liability in your permit when they sign it, recognizing who they represent and themselves as an individual, then at least it puts them on notice that if there's damage to be done to our community or communities, that they can be held liable personally and financially for the cost.
Well, we're in enforcing this, we're relying on our law enforcement officers and the criminal justice system with our DA. If someone destroys property, and all of these things are filmed, everybody's got their cell phone out. And the property owner can determine who destroyed it. They can certainly go after them for that destruction. I don't know of a way we could, to put a limit like that on their speech would be difficult, I think. But if we do know that it is a recognized, organized event that does this type of stuff, sure we could deny a permit in those situations.
So you're really looking back to find personal liability. If, say, I'm one of the guys and I decide I'm going to go over here and tear something up, you're going to come after me, not the group, but the person that does the damage.
And that is the general statutes that we cite are all under Chapter 14. Disorderly conduct and injuries to public buildings and facilities, disorderly conduct, public disturbance, standing, sitting, or lying on the highway, second-degree trespass, willful and wanton injury to property. All these things are covered in the appendix to the ordinance. All of those are criminal statutes. But if we make it a requirement that they post a bond or something like that, that's too much of a restraint on their free speech. I think the court would probably shoot that down.
Just the liability perspective, though, from a civil perspective, is simpler to prosecute than it is from a criminal perspective, right?
Well, from what I have read and seen, our Attorney General is focusing on the prosecution side now, and I believe he's got several hundred defendants he's going to be inviting to court. I think a lot of them are in custody, and once that wave starts, I think you'll see a reduction in this type of activity when someone knows they're going to be prosecuted. Maybe think twice.
Well, you know, a lot of times causing problems can not really damage property, but to go out and just block roads. You see this in a lot of the cities. They're just blocking a interstate.
Mm-hmm.
They can't do that.
That's what we have in our policy. They can't block the crosswalk. They have to move on. And we've had pretty good success with it thus far, I think.
I mean, they need to realize that. They can't go down here and block that circle up, no matter what they're doing.
Well, there's state law that prohibits it too.
Mm-hmm.
Standing, sitting, or lying on the highways is prohibited. You
I
can't
think
impede
we
the
need to
flow
be
of
as
traffic.
clear as we can possibly be with everybody. I don't care what your opinion or whatever. We as a county need to be clear. This is what we expect in our jurisdiction.
Well, I think we're coming close with this policy. And I'd ask for you to adopt the resolution approving it with the understanding that it is subject to being amended.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Lashley and a second by Mr. Sutton to adopt the resolution to approve the resolution adopting the Alamance County Historic Courthouse Facility Use Policy.
Would
Is there
it
any
be
more
appropriate
discussion?
to have Clyde read what we're exactly approving right here?
How about I read it?
Are you
'Cause I
read?
got it
How
right
about
here.
you read?
I have it right here.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, this is the resolution, it's
Yeah.
not the whole policy.
I
don't
know,
think
but
you
it's
want
a
him to read that.
resolution. It's
All right,
summarizes.
It's all right, you have copies of the policy.
Not with me, I'll be happy to email it to you. I have your email, you know.
There's a link to it in the agenda, I believe, right?
If it's in the agenda packet.
It should be, yeah.
It is, I believe. Is that not what you're reading, Amy?
no, I'm reading the resolution.
The resolution itself, it's just
Not the policy.
highlights the points that Clyde just went over.
All
That's what
right.
I've got right here, yeah.
Whereas the public areas of the historic courthouse are presumed to be open to the public for lawful purposes, including the free expression of ideas, and whereas law enforcement officers have a duty to safeguard the lawful and open use of the historic courthouse and protect the free expression of beliefs by imposing reasonable time, place, and manner restrictions for the use of courthouse spaces. And whereas in order to achieve these goals of safeguarding free speech, protecting property, and providing for the safety of individuals, law enforcement officers may temporarily restrict access to certain outdoor historic courthouse spaces during short-term emergency situations. And whereas achieving these goals requires a policy that provides guiding principles and flexibility to respond to specific articulable threats, and whereas the Sheriff's Department has developed a permitting policy and process that addresses location concerns, distinguishes between large and small gatherings, both spontaneous and organized, and sets forth enforcement procedures that preserve the ability of individuals to exercise free speech, maintain the peace, protect public property, and prevent injury to the public. Be it therefore resolved that the Alamance County Board of County Commissioners hereby approves and adopts the historic courthouse facility use policy and permitting process.
Thank you.
So we have a motion and a second to approve that resolution. Is there any more discussion? If not, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed?
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Next on our agenda are the budget amendments. We have something from Parks and Rec. We have Brian Baker, our Parks and Rec Director here. Approval to apply for recreational trails program funding.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Welcome, how you doing?
Good, thank you. Just here to seek approval on behalf of the Recreation and Parks Department to apply for funding for what is Phase 2 of the Cane Creek Mountains Natural Area. We've opened Phase 1 completely now without reservation to the public as of a couple weeks ago. It's going well, it's very popular, but we're already starting work on Phase 2. This grant would help us with the construction of trails, up to 8 miles of trails in this phase. So this grant is from the Recreation Trails Program. It's a state program that provides funds for these, and we'll be asking for $250,000. It does require a 25% match. However, we've been able to meet that requirement with some of the previous land acquisition and private donations and grants we've already received. So I'm not seeking any additional county funding today, just permission to apply for this grant, and if it's awarded, to amend the budget as required.
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Boswell and a second by Mr. Lashley to approve that application. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, the Health Department has a request for approval to apply for the grant, and we have Interim Health Director Alex Rimmer here.
Welcome. How you doing?
Good morning. How are y'all? So we're requesting approval for a maternal health grant that focuses on access to telecare. And so we typically, right now we have as our standard of care a centering pregnancy program. And what that does is it allows cohorts of women that are pregnant to have their care together. It allows for decrease in preterm and low birth rates, increase in breastfeeding, and so this increases birth outcomes. And so Alamance County actually has a higher rate of preterm births than the state, so we're at 11.2, whereas the state is at 10.4. And this is an evidence-based program, and so since COVID, this program was put on hold, and we're actually one of the pilot counties. Our staff at the health department created a virtual program to use Zoom to be able to do this with breakout rooms. And so one of the biggest barriers that we found is that most of our clients don't have access to using data on their phones and things like that. And so in the last community health assessment, access to care was identified as one of our main things throughout the community that we needed. And so this grant would allow us to be able to give our patients Wi-Fi hotspots and data plans. We'd be able to send home equipment to do blood pressure checks, scales, checking blood sugar for those that it's necessary for, and it would reduce exposure, so they wouldn't be coming into the clinic quite as often. And you know, as our maternity patients, they are a highly susceptible population, and so just having it where they're able to get proper care at home would be really important. Right now, we've been doing a lot of over the phone, and so we can't see the patient, and so that level of care is not able to be met like we would like. So this runs from October 1st until April 31st of 2021. There's no county match that needs to be met. We're asking for $60,000 with the grant, and so we just wanted to seek approval for that.
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Carter and a second by Commissioner Lashley to approve that application. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, don't go, tell me what I need to do here. I asked her out of session, could I ask some questions about the COVID scenario? How would you prefer to handle that?
We've got commissioner comments coming up. You could wait until then, but if you want to just go ahead.
Well, I'll leave that up to her. If she wants to wait till then, I'll be glad to.
Depends on what the questions are.
All right. Now, what I want to ask is we were showing 71,692. Is that correct? Negative tests. Does that sound right?
So I haven't actually seen that figure. So what I look at is the number of tests weekly versus the percent positivity of the amount of tests that are done. So I don't want to speak to that, but I can look.
I guess this is us. I mean, it's showing total positive 4,334. So, I mean, it looks like Alamance County. I mean, it's on this last report that Michelle Gate put out, I guess. But my question is really positive, believe it or not. You got total case tests, 76,374, and you got 71,692 negative. Total population of Alamance County is what? Brian?
About, yes, between 160 and 170,000.
All right, so that's a big gap there. But if you've got 71,000 or 76,374 that's been tested now, you would imagine that the majority of those are adults, I would assume. Would you assume that?
So I don't know where that number is coming from, so I don't really want to speak to it, just because on average we've had about 3,000 tests per week, and I have to go back and do the math to really know. And looking at ages, so when we look at ages, in the beginning, they weren't reporting negative tests back to us, and so it's really hard to pull that data. So we have the data for the positive cases, like we show in our weekly demographic, where you'll see kind of the age range and different things, and I believe the 20s to 40s is the highest caseload. I know we talked a little bit about that before, but as far as who's getting the test, I don't have those numbers.
not so many people in the county, but, and I mean that, I don't mean that sarcastically either. I mean, it just looks like we're testing a lot of our people, and that's great. That's great. And I want to ask you, again, there just seems to be a quick in and out process. You know, I've brought this up 15 times, I think, between you and Stacy. But, you know, you've got 5,000 some, I think, that we tested, 4,334 cases positive, but we've only got 200 that we're actively looking at right now. And
So right now, we're actually at 3,432 cumulative cases, so that's over
Right.
the whole time. That's as of yesterday. I don't pull the numbers until around 12 o'clock, so, and we have 319 active cases.
Right, that's what I'm trying to refer to, that
And
figure.
here, we got this up now.
Yeah, okay, so again, I still say it's quick in and out, and I'm not blaming anybody. I mean, it's, you know, they get cured awful quick, don't they? And they're not getting any medical treatment. And that I can speak of. I'm not being critical. I'm just saying that, you know, I'm putting my perspective on it. Is the rest of the counties, do they have as much of a quick in and out as we do, to where, you know, they've tested thousands, but they've only got 300 or 200 or so that are active? Do you know a trend there? I guess it would be about the same, wouldn't it?
So in relation to the counties surrounding us, right this second, we have a little bit higher percent positivity. I don't know if you've seen, if you'll go down one more. So we were around 7% for 3 weeks. It had come drastically down. It's gone up just a little bit. I apologize, I can't read that number from here.
9.1.
Thank you. And so what that's showing is we have a little bit higher rate, and it's hard to really compare because if we start looking at somewhere like Guilford, you have to take the number and look at population versus their cumulative cases and active. Same if you're looking at Orange or Chatham or any of those. So we are pretty comparable to the state. The state percent positivity had been 7% for quite a while. So we are pretty comparable to North Carolina. So as far as the guidelines on how quickly you would get better, we all follow the CDC guidelines, and so that's going to be the 10 days. If you meet the 10-day requirement with 24 hours fever-free, your symptoms have decreased, so the cough's not as bad, that kind of thing, then you would be able to come out of isolation at that point at day 10. But as far, that's the course that everywhere is taking, so all the counties in the state.
If you look at Friday's report, I thought this was interesting. Randolph County, and I'm not sure exactly how they stack with us on population, but we had 3,259 cases at that point and 46 deaths. Randolph County had 2,438 cases and 44 deaths. From a survivability perspective, it sounds like we're doing better than they are. I don't know how how that relates, but
So I will say our case investigators work very hard.